I came home to Pinebrook, Ohio, hoping this Christmas would feel different. I wanted warmth, a little peace, and maybe a normal holiday for once. But the moment I stepped into my mother's living room, I knew I had been wrong. My sister's kids were already on the floor, surrounded by piles of wrapping paper and bright boxes, 36 gifts, all for them. The room was loud with their excitement, the kind of loud that usually makes you smile. But my eyes went straight to my son, Grayson. He stood near the doorway, hands in his pockets, trying to understand why there wasn't a single gift for him. No wrapping paper. No bag with his name. Not even a stocking hanging by the fireplace. He looked so small in that crowded room, like he didn't belong there at all. I felt the air leave my chest. I kept waiting for someone, my mother, my sister, anyone, to say there had been a mix-up. But no one did. No one even looked surprised. It was as if this was normal to them. Grayson glanced up at me with this quiet, worried expression. He didn't say anything, but I could see the question in his eyes. I felt something inside me twist, sharp and hot. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't disappointment. It was something deeper, something that came from years of pretending things would ever change. I stood there, watching the cousins rip open another round of gifts while my son stood empty-handed, and I knew this moment wasn't an accident. It wasn't thoughtlessness. It was a choice. A clear message. And in that moment, something in me finally snapped. Growing up, I learned early that my mother, Marjorie, saw my sister Clarice as the one who could do no wrong. Clarice was the shining daughter, the one my mother bragged about to neighbors and relatives. I was the one she spoke about only when she had to, usually with a sigh or a comment about how I made things harder than they needed to be. As a kid, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it didn't matter. But it did. It shaped everything. When I became a mom, I truly believed things might change. I thought holding her first grandson would soften something in her, maybe make her see me differently. I hoped she would look at Grayson and want to build something real with us. But instead of helping, motherhood made the gap wider. Clarice had her kids soon after, and my mother's attention went straight to them, as if that was where it always belonged. Whenever we visited, she treated Clarice's children like treasures. She'd bake their favorite cookies, plan small surprises, and talk to them as if every word they said mattered. When it came to Grayson, she barely looked up. She'd pat his shoulder, offer a short greeting, then move on. He noticed, even when he tried to pretend he didn't. I spent years telling myself I was imagining things. I tried to excuse her behavior, tried to remember the few good moments. But the truth was always right there, steady and sharp. No matter how much I tried to bridge the distance, my mother kept me and my son at the edge of her life, while pulling Clarice and her children closer without effort. I kept hoping things would turn around. But each year, the favoritism only grew stronger, and I grew more tired of pretending it didn't hurt. The drive from Indiana to Ohio felt longer than usual, even though I had made that trip more times than I could count. The roads were quiet, and the winter sky hung low, the kind that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. Grayson sat in the back seat, humming to himself, kicking his boots together, already talking about the games he planned to play with his cousins. His excitement made me smile, even as a knot tightened in my stomach. I kept my hand steady on the wheel and tried to focus on the good. I reminded myself that people change, that families can surprise you when you least expect it. I told myself that this Christmas might be calmer, kinder. I practiced lines in my head, simple, gentle things I could say to my mother to keep the peace. Let's start fresh. I want things to be better between us. I hope today goes well. I repeated them quietly, as if saying them enough times would make them true. Every now and then, Grayson leaned forward and asked how much longer we had. Each time, his voice was full of pure excitement, and it made me want to believe in something hopeful. I didn't want my worries to touch him. I wanted him to feel safe, wanted, welcomed. So I kept my doubts to myself and kept driving. As we crossed the state line, I breathed in slowly and told myself, maybe this year will be different. I clung to that thought, even though another part of me whispered that I'd said the same thing last year, and the year before that. But hope can be stubborn, and for Grayson's sake, I let it stay with me all the way to Pinebrook. When we finally stepped inside my mother's house, the first thing I noticed was how packed the living room was. Every corner seemed to shine with bright wrapping paper and ribbons. Dozens of gifts were stacked under the tree, some piled so high they nearly touched the branches. Clarice's kids, Piper, Holden, and little May, were already kneeling on the carpet, pointing at tags and guessing which ones were theirs. Marjorie stood nearby with a proud smile, her hands clasped together like she had been waiting all month for this moment. She told the kids to go ahead, and they tore into the first round of gifts with loud cheers. Boxes opened, paper flew around them, and every new toy brought another burst of excitement. I looked around for something, anything, with Grayson's name on it. A small box. A stocking. Even a card. But nothing stood out. The stockings hung on the mantel, and I counted them twice to be sure. One for Piper. One for Holden. One for May. None for Grayson. He stood beside me, staring at the tree with this confused, hopeful look, like maybe the gifts for him were hidden or waiting for a special moment. I kept scanning the room, trying to make sense of it. But the longer I looked, the clearer it was, there was no mistake. My mother didn't even glance our way. She was too busy watching Clarice's kids open tablets, dolls, new shoes. Clarice laughed along with them, acting like this was the most natural thing in the world. No one questioned why Grayson had nothing in his hands. I felt a slow, heavy ache settle in my chest. I tried to swallow it down, tried to keep Grayson from seeing it on my face. But the truth sat there in front of me, bright as the wrapping paper scattered across the floor. There was no pile for him. Not a single thing. My son had been completely left out, and everyone acted like it was normal. Grayson tugged gently on my sleeve, his eyes lowered as if he was afraid to speak too loudly. When he looked up, there was a small tremble in his voice. "Mom, did I do something wrong?" he asked. The question hit hard, sharper than anything else that had happened. He wasn't angry or loud, just confused and hurt, trying to make sense of why every other child in the room mattered except him. Before I could answer, Marjorie finally turned toward us. For a moment, I thought she might realize how cruel this all looked. But she only gave Grayson a quick glance, the kind people give when they're already bored. "He's old enough to understand life isn't fair," she said, waving her hand like it was nothing. "He'll be fine." Her voice was steady, cold, as if she wasn't speaking to her own grandson but to some stranger who wandered in by accident. I felt Grayson shrink beside me. He lowered his head again, and I could see him swallow hard, trying not to cry. Clarice caught my eye from across the room. She didn't say a word, but the small smirk on her face said enough. She looked proud, almost satisfied, like this was all part of some long, silent message she wanted me to hear. It wasn't about gifts. It was about place, hers, and mine. The rest of the family sat around the room pretending to be busy. Some stared at their hands, some at the kids ripping more paper, but none of them said anything. No one stepped in. No one asked why a child was sitting empty-handed on Christmas morning. They all let it happen. They all let my son be humiliated right there in the open, as if he deserved it, as if his feelings didn't matter at all. That silence told me everything. I waited until the kids were distracted with their new toys before pulling my mother aside into the hallway. My heart was pounding, not from anger yet, but from disbelief. I kept my voice low, trying not to make a scene. "Why didn't you get anything for Grayson?" I asked. "Not even something small?" Marjorie crossed her arms like she was already tired of the conversation. "I'm not responsible for rewarding your choices, Lena," she said flatly. "You decided to build your life the way you did. That's not on me." For a second, I just stared at her, not sure I heard her right. "He's a child," I said. "Your grandson." She shrugged, completely unmoved. "And I invest in the grandchildren who matter." The ones who are part of the family the right way. Clarice and her kids are stable. They're respectful. They reflect well on us. I'm not spreading myself thin anymore. It felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I had expected excuses, maybe a weak apology, something I could at least try to understand. But her words were deliberate. Calm. Thought out. She wasn't sorry. She wanted me to know she had made a choice. I felt something inside me crack, but not in the way she probably hoped. The hurt was there, sharp and deep, but behind it something else rose up, hot, steady, and clear. For years, I had swallowed moments like this. I had let her comments slide, convinced myself the good outweighed the bad. But seeing Grayson pushed aside so easily, spoken about like he was nothing, that woke something in me I didn't know I had. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I didn't recognize the woman standing in front of me anymore. And I knew, right then, that this was the last time I would let her treat my son this way. I walked back into the living room without saying a word. The noise hit me immediately, Piper shouting about her new tablet, Holden testing the controls on a small drone, May giggling as she unwrapped another doll. Their excitement bounced off the walls, filling every corner of the house. No one noticed me kneeling beside Grayson to help him with his coat. No one cared that we were getting ready to leave. I went to the guest room and packed his small bag, folding his things as quietly as I could. My hands were steady, even though my chest felt tight. Grayson followed me without asking questions, like he already knew this moment meant something important. I zipped up the bag, took his hand, and guided him through the hallway. Marjorie was still watching the kids tear open their next round of gifts. She didn't look up. Clarice didn't either. They were too caught up in the bright lights and cheerful noise to notice us slipping on our shoes. No one asked where we were going. No one even said goodbye. I opened the front door, and the cold air rushed in. The sound of the house, those loud shouts and happy squeals, faded as the door closed behind us. Only then did Marjorie finally turn her head, but it was too late. We were already walking to the car. Once Grayson was buckled in, I started the engine. The quiet inside the car felt almost heavy. He stared out the window for a long moment, and then his voice broke. "Mom," he whispered, "why does Grandma hate me?" The tears slipped down his cheeks, silent and confused. Hearing him say those words made something inside me twist painfully. I reached back and held his hand, promising him softly that none of this was his fault, even as my own heart cracked wide open. The drive back toward Indiana felt heavy and silent, but my mind wasn't quiet at all. Every cruel word, every cold look, every moment of Grayson standing there with nothing replayed in my head like a loop I couldn't turn off. I kept glancing at him in the mirror, his eyes red and tired, and I felt a deep, steady anger settle into place. Not wild, not loud, just firm. Somewhere on that long stretch of road, another thought rose up. Something practical, something I had pushed to the back of my mind for months. My father's land. The property he left behind when he passed. Acres of open fields he always said were for all his children, not just one. I had been made co-trustee with my mother, even though she acted like the land already belonged to Clarice. They had plans for it, big plans. A developer had been circling, offering a lot of money, and they wanted to sell quickly. They had been waiting on me. My signature was required. Not optional. Required. And they never once worried that I might say no. They assumed I'd fall in line the way I always had. They counted on me being the quiet daughter, the reasonable one, the one who didn't fight back. Whenever the topic came up, Marjorie would pat my arm like she was being generous by including me, then remind me that Clarice knew more about these things. Clarice would just smile like the outcome was already decided. They believed I would do the right thing, which to them meant signing whatever papers they put in front of me and staying out of the way. But now, remembering how my son had stood in front of them with empty hands while they acted like he didn't exist, something inside me shifted. All the years of swallowing pain, all the times I let things slide for the sake of peace, all the moments I told myself to be patient, those were gone. I realized then that they had no idea who they were dealing with anymore. A few days after Christmas, the phone rang, and Marjorie's voice was sharp and impatient on the other end. She wasted no time with small talk. "Lena, I need you to sign the papers for the land sale. The developer is ready, and this is your chance to make things easy. Clarice and I will handle the rest." I listened quietly, letting her words settle. My hands gripped the counter, steady. Every detail of that morning, the empty gifts, Grayson's confused face, the way they all ignored us, flashed before me. I could hear the smug certainty in her voice, the assumption that I would comply without question. "I'm not signing," I said finally, my voice calm, even, but firm. There was a pause on the other end, the kind that comes when someone doesn't expect you to resist. "I'm keeping my half," I continued. "And I plan to develop it myself. You and Clarice won't be touching a single dollar." Marjorie's tone sharpened, trying to mask disbelief with authority. "Lena, this isn't reasonable. You're making a mistake. You'll regret it." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Regret? I think you're the ones who will. After everything, I'm done letting you take what isn't yours and treating my son like he doesn't matter." Her voice rose a little, but I didn't falter. She tried every tactic, guilt, pressure, even veiled threats, but I held firm. For the first time, I realized the power I had in this situation. They had assumed I was the passive one, the one who would always give in. They had assumed wrong. I ended the call knowing that the tables had finally turned. For once, I wasn't helpless. For once, Grayson wouldn't be invisible. And the look on Marjorie and Clarice's faces when they realized they were cut out completely? That thought made the tight knot in my chest ease just a little. The next time I saw Marjorie and Clarice, it was like stepping into a storm. They cornered me in the kitchen, voices rising, words sharp and fast. "You're being vindictive, Lena," Marjorie shouted. "This isn't how family works. You're ruining everything." Clarice nodded, adding her own fury. "We can't believe you'd do this. After everything, after all we've done for you, you're being cruel." I took a deep breath and met their eyes steadily. "Cruel?" I said, my voice calm but firm. "Do you really think taking away gifts from my son, ignoring him while you shower your own children with everything, is kind? That's cruel. That's what you call family?" They faltered for a moment, but only briefly. Marjorie tried to interrupt, but I didn't let her. "You made Grayson feel invisible on Christmas. You made him think he doesn't matter. That isn't something I will ever allow again. Not now. Not ever." Clarice scoffed, waving her hands like I was overreacting. "It's just a holiday, Lena. Don't be so dramatic." I shook my head. "No. It's not just a holiday. It's the way you treat people. You've spent years treating me like I'm less, and now you want to do the same to my son. I won't fund your lifestyle. I won't hand over what is mine so you can live comfortably while ignoring him. I'm done pretending that's okay." Their faces twisted, frustration and disbelief mixing with anger. But I could see it too, the first flicker of doubt. They had counted on me, on my quiet compliance. That assumption was gone. For the first time, I felt the weight lift. I wasn't the powerless one in the family anymore. And I knew that from this point on, Grayson would never feel invisible in my life, or anywhere else I could protect him. After everything that had happened, I knew I needed to make a change, not just for me, but for Grayson. I wanted him to feel safe, loved, and important, the way every child deserves. That meant creating our own traditions, ones that didn't rely on anyone else's approval or attention. I started with the land I had kept. It wasn't much at first, just open fields and a few old trees, but it was ours. I began building a small cabin, simple but warm, a place where Grayson and I could spend time together without the shadow of disappointment hanging over us. Every beam I put in place felt like reclaiming a piece of our happiness. We decorated the cabin for our first holiday there, stringing lights across the porch and hanging stockings by the little fireplace I had built. I let Grayson help with everything, choosing the decorations, arranging the furniture, even picking out a small tree. His laughter filled the cabin, a sound that had been missing for far too long. That Christmas, and every one after, we didn't need anyone else to define what family meant. We baked cookies together, told stories late into the night, and even made our own silly games. Grayson didn't just get gifts, he got attention, care, and the quiet reassurance that he mattered, that he was the center of our little world. Watching him curl up by the fire, smiling with contentment, I felt a deep relief. The fear and hurt from before didn't disappear completely, but they became smaller, overshadowed by the love we shared. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was giving him something no one else could take away, a home full of warmth, security, and the certainty that he was cherished. And in creating that for him, I found healing for myself too. 2 years passed quietly, but the memory of that first cruel Christmas never left me. I focused on Grayson and our life together, on building the cabin and filling it with warmth and laughter. The land became more than just property, it became our sanctuary, a place where we could be free from the hurt of the past. One morning, the phone rang. It was the developer again, but this time the offer was different. They wanted to buy only my portion of the land, and the price was far higher than anyone had expected. I listened to the numbers, letting them sink in. The thought of finally letting go, of closing that chapter completely, felt strangely satisfying. I agreed to the sale. It was quick and clean, and as the papers were signed, I felt the weight lift. Marjorie and Clarice had no control anymore, no way to interfere, no leverage. They had assumed I would always comply, always yield. They had counted on my quiet submission, and now it was gone. I stood on the porch of our cabin with Grayson that evening, the sun dipping low and casting a golden glow across the fields. He leaned against me, smiling, and I could see the peace in his eyes. No one could ever make him feel like he didn't matter again. Not Marjorie, not Clarice, not anyone. For the first time, I felt the full measure of what we had built together. This was our life, our rules, our love. The hurt of the past had shaped us, but it no longer controlled us. I took a deep breath, letting the cool evening air fill my lungs, and I knew with certainty that I had created something permanent, a life where my son was safe, cherished, and never expendable. And that knowledge, more than anything, felt like victory.